Morning, everyone. The Victoria Arts Council respectfully acknowledges the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking people, known today as the First Nations of the Esquimalt, Songhees, and Wasanich, respectfully. The Indigenous relationships with the land and diverse cultural traditions continue to this day and in perpetuity. So we respectfully acknowledge these and understand that there is more work to do, and conversations like today will be one step in the right direction. So my name is Kagan McFadden, and I'm the Executive Director of the Victoria Arts Council and the co-lead of Creative Mornings Victoria. And absent today is Leah McInnes, our other co-lead and outreach coordinator for the VAC. Leah's on art residency and research production time on the East Coast. So we are sending good vibes her way. But in her stead, and nonetheless, is Cass McConkey, our program coordinator. So Cass, take it away.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share some slides. All right, so welcome to Creative Mornings. June's theme is wilderness. So we travel to the edges of our known world, to wander, to lose ourselves, to commune with the wilderness. Dappled light dripping in through the forest canopy, insects buzzing as feet squelch through the wetlands, inhaling the hot air and endless skies of the desert. We long for this. Some of us seek enchantment and estrangement here. Some of us call it home. Our Chattanooga chapter chose this month's exploration of wilderness, and Holly Chastain illustrated the theme. Thank you to MailChimp, Creative Mornings' official global partner for marketing. The MailChimp & Co. 2022 benchmark report is now live. This year, more than 2,000 freelancers and 63 agencies provided insights into how to win more business, find and retain top talent, mitigate risk, and improve your performance. These insights and inspiration can be delivered directly to your inbox. You can check out MailChimp.com for details. Thank you to the City of Victoria and the CRD for their continued support. And thank you to HCMA. HCMA is an architecture firm that designs buildings, brands, and shared experiences that connect people. We are from the Victoria Arts Council, and we'd like to share our current exhibition, which is on until July 17th. It is Life's Work, a visual memoir by B.A. Lampman. This exhibit underscores the VAC's commitment to supporting local artists and the exploration through art and often hard realities. Life's Work is presented at the main gallery at 1800 Store Street with a special installation in the vault. So our hearts are really hurting for what's happening in the Ukraine right now. We have 3 chapters in Ukraine, and the Creative Mornings headquarters community team has been in touch with them. They're currently doing okay, and when we asked what is needed, they sent us some organizations that we can work through to help out. You can find these resources in our blog post at creativemornings.com. And without further ado, please welcome our speaker today, Jessie Demers. Jessie is an independent curator, arts administrator, and activist living on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen speaking peoples. Jessie has worked in the visual arts since 2006, including 5 years as a curator and education programmer at Touchstone's Nelson Museum of Art and History. She has been involved in environmental activism and social justice movements since she was 16 years old. In March of 2021, Jessie established the Eden Grove Artist in Residence program located on the Pashudat territory. The studio is adjacent to one of the many old growth blockades, which collectively saw over 1,100 arrests. An exhibition of work by resident artists took place at Fortune Gallery in Victoria in August of 2021. And a larger exhibition, including a wider range of artists, will be taking place at the Legacy Galleries. Jessie holds a BFA from the Nova Scotia University of Art and Design and a Bachelor of Education from UBC. I will pass it on to Jessie.
Thank you. I'm really grateful for this opportunity and excited to to share some of this information and artwork with the community. If I can ask people to mute, that would help me to be less distracted if there's any background noise. I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, I just wanted to start with kind of bringing in the experience of standing in an old growth rainforest and what that's like, to kind of get our minds there and go on a little journey together. Can't quite, oh, okay, here we go. This is a soundtrack field recording from Eden Grove that Paul Wald recorded, and it's going to be in the exhibition Still Standing Ancient Forest Futures. So just gonna sit with this for a minute. If you've spent time in an old growth forest, if you can just type into the chat something about your experience, like one word that describes your experience or something that you learned from the forest. Has anybody spent time in old growth forest? Oh, there we go. Time. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, receiving messages from the trees. I've definitely experienced that as well. Yeah, there can be, I think, a sense of belonging, a sense of home. I know for me as a teenager, the first times that I went there was just kind of mind-boggling to see the time scale in the forest. You know, that you're looking at a tree that's gonna be 1,000 years old, and you can tell that it grew on a nurse log from a tree, you know, that could have been 1,000 years old. So you just start thinking about how ancient the soil is that you're standing on and how these places have never been logged. You're just witnessing how an ecosystem has developed since the last ice age. And it's just, you know, it's incredible. And I just think, like, being raised in a consumer culture, you know, under capitalism, under like colonialism, there's just so much separation from the land. And I think, like, as a settler, like, there's disconnection from our own, you know, my own lands of origin. Plus I'm an adoptee. So there's lots, I think, that happened for me, like connecting with the forest and kind of reflecting on what it means to be a human, like beyond the things that we're taught to value, and just really seeing the value of life itself and these life support systems that we all depend upon for our survival. And I think that's just becoming more and more evident now, that what we do to the planet is affecting us, it's affecting the climate. And so these places, these ancient forests, are really important globally, like not just locally. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a minute, but yeah, this topic of wilderness, I love it. And also just want to acknowledge that the word wilderness does refer to like a natural area that's like uninhabited and like relatively untouched by humans. And sometimes that definition can be a bit problematic because it can negate like the historical and ongoing relationships of Indigenous peoples to their territories. We know that like coastal First Nations have interacted with the forest since time immemorial, and especially like red cedar, known as the tree of life, you know, provided planks for construction and totems and canoes. And there's medicinal and food plants in the forest, you know, also. So just, you know, and it's a site for, you know, cultural and spiritual practices that come from the land. So I think it's always important to keep that in mind, and conservation movements do need to center Indigenous sovereignty and as well as that just transition for workers, while we're, you know, all trying to preserve the life support systems that we all rely upon for future generations. So yeah, temperate rainforests on the coast, they actually sequester the highest amount of carbon in the world, second amount of highest amount of carbon in the world in terms of ecosystems worldwide. And they also mitigate wildfires and flooding and contain an immense amount of biodiversity. So we're really lucky on the island that there's still some shreds left that we can visit and connect with. So to contrast, let's see if I can move this over. There we go. And I love seeing all your faces. I think I'm going to minimize it. So this is a large scale clear cut. As you can see, that has been burned. It happens sometimes. They create these big slash burn piles that can get out of control. So logging old growth forest releases 40 to 65% of the carbon stored in their ecosystems into the atmosphere pretty much right away. Like even when you calculate for the carbon that remains in the resulting wood products. So it's just a huge problem with climate change. And we know that like the NDP, they promised to save old growth forests in their election campaign. And very like little progress has been made. Old growth logging permits have actually increased by 43% under their watch, and logging continues in many of the areas that they've proposed for deferral, including Kaikous Valley. And based on some science that the Sierra Club commissioned, there's about 35 soccer fields a day of old growth that is logged in BC. So yeah, I just throwing out a bunch of facts right now, but between 2005 and 2017, the amount of clear cutting that happened, this includes old growth and second growth, was the equivalent of about the size of Vancouver Island. So these are huge sequestration dead zones where there's no carbon being sequestered, they're just still releasing it. So it actually takes, after an area has been planted, a tree farm has been planted, because you can't replant a forest. It takes 13 years before those trees are actually going to start sequestering more carbon than is being released by the exposed soil and everything. So we know that their second growth forests are not the same. So this is, you know, how you can imagine what BC might have looked like from space before logging began. And then you can see, yeah, where there's productive old growth forests and mountains and everything. So this is remaining old growth forests in BC. So the productive low-lying old growth, just these little dark green patches. So we're actually down to about 2.7% of tall tree productive old growth that you think of when you think of, you know, what is old growth. When the government calculates what old growth is, they're considering anything that's even subalpine that has no economic value to them. And they say there's 18% left, you know, 18% of the BC's forested area, but that is not the same as these lush productive old growth areas. So in September of 2020, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs called for a halt to old growth logging in the province while conversations were taking place with the government. However, that hasn't happened. The BC government says they need permission first from First Nations before they protect old growth. So they don't seem to seek consent for cutting, just for, they say, for protection. Even though the new Chatlet are fighting for their old growth right now, and the NDP is, they're at the Supreme Court fighting about that, and the Squamish Nation has demanded a deferral on old growth logging as well. So yeah, there's lots of hypocrisy, and like I say, these 2-year deferral areas that they proposed are actually being cut as we speak. So there's a lot of empty promises. So how I came to getting involved with all this, when I was 16 years old, I went to Walbrand Valley, and this is an image of the river there, and this place called Emerald Canyon, and it's just a gorgeous spot. It's like paradise there. And I went on a trail building trip with the Western Canada Wilderness Committee, and then became involved that way. And yeah, I created an environmental group at my school, and our art club ended up sort of becoming an outdoor club. And we went on a trip. This is Anderson Lake back in the early 90s. This is probably 91. It was pretty life-changing for me to go there. There used to be a cable car that went over the river that's now fallen apart. I remember around that time, well, I guess before the hot summer in the Walbrand and the war in the woods and all of that, or maybe right when the war in the woods was sort of heating up, this book had been made. And I was really inspired by the fact that 100 artists had gone out into the forest and made artwork. And it was really useful for me as a way to kind of digest my own experiences of being out there, and to kind of hold those places in my heart and my mind when I wasn't there. And I think that kind of stuck with me, because I ended up doing something on a much smaller scale, but inspired by that idea of, like, what can artists bring to appeal to our imaginations in ways that just scientific reports or the intensity of direct action can't. Things can be polarizing, things can be scary. If there's police involved, there's lots of people that wouldn't necessarily want to be involved with direct action. But it's like, what can art do to open up conversations, to provide these sort of embodied experiences that move us past paralysis and into action, just by helping us to even connect with our own grief around what's happening to the planet, or just understand different perspectives. So this was the early 90s. I was in grade 12 or something, and this is in Walbrand, Cahex, as it's called. And the area past the bridge was actually, it ended up being, the road did go through, and one more cut block was put through. But I think there was 90 days of direct action. And I joined with, some of us created Victoria chapter of the Environmental Youth Alliance, and spent time out there. There were members of Earth First out there, Terra Prima, as well as Indigenous land defenders, Paul Winstanley, Peter Knighton. And actually, I learned recently that Carrie Newman was one of the members of the Environmental Youth Alliance as well. And somehow we didn't remember each other from back then, but we probably did go to meetings or were out at Walbrand together. So that was kind of a fun connection. So as 16-year-olds, we organized letter writing campaigns. We did a fast, we hung banners, we disrupted political speeches with banners, and it was lots of fun. We did a blockade, our own little blockade as well, which wasn't very successful. Some people tried to cement themselves in the road, and they ended up being on the wrong logging road. And so anyways, that's a whole different story. But I think we were inspired by the slightly older activists that were there at the time. There's activists from Europe that came over and everything. So it was a pretty heady time. You can see this tree here. There was a tree sit in that silver kind of tree there, that snag that ended up getting cut down. Just that one day the loggers came and cut it down to just dishearten everybody. But anyways, this is the Clayoquot Sound blockade. So I ended up getting arrested at Clayoquot Sound and ended up in this Ian Wallace artwork. He was there as well. It's just kind of fun to share this. That's me. And then in this one as well. So I was actually volunteering at the Vancouver Art Gallery one day and I saw myself in the artwork and was kind of astonished. So I went off and did other things. I went to NASCAD, I went traveling and stuff. And then when I came back to the island, I got involved with the Friends of Carmena Walbrand. And they had been organizing these convergence gatherings in the Walbrand. And this was, I came back, the year I came back, it was the 25th anniversary of what they call the hot summer in the Walbrand, when all the blockading happened. So it was pretty emotional. You know, I spoke about my involvement and that was when I first met Elder Bill Jones, Petchette Elder Bill Jones. It was 2016, and he's been connected with members of Friends of Carmena Walbrand for the last about 10 years. They've been working together closely. Anyways, I'm taking too long. This is the Harriet Nahani Trail that was launched, that was opened at that event. And Harriet Nahani was a Petchette activist passionate about protecting old growth forests on her territory. She passed away, but her family was there. Her family cut the ribbon, and it was quite historic as well because Elder Bill Jones was there as well as elected chief Jeff Jones and his family. So it was kind of a really nice moment of unity. And fast forward to last year in the Fairy Creek blockades, you can see Elder Bill Jones in the center there with his hat, and to his right is Pally Jones, his niece, who is, I think, still up there holding things down. So yeah, so I became involved, and I was trying to think, well, what can I do? How can I support the movement in my own way? And I thought about having an artist in residence program. I wanted it to be kind of at arm's length from the blockades, because, like I said, I wanted it to sort of create space for conversation and kind of be its own entity. And so the Eden camp had been established in December. There's people there over the winter in their buses with their wood stoves and everything. And by March, I thought, okay, this camp is really stable. It's close to an area of old growth. I think that I could have a studio tent there, and the people at camp could sort of keep an eye on it, and I wouldn't have to, I wasn't able to be there all the time. So here's just some shots of Eden Grove, big cedars. I don't actually have many photos of Eden Camp, but this is a drawing by Emma Fitzgerald, who's one of the artists that just sort of emailed me and was like, hey, I'm going up there, you know, and, you know, she wasn't part of the residency, but she just went and did her own thing. I think a lot of people a lot of people emailed me to participate. I ended up inviting the artist rather than doing a call, because it would have been too overwhelming, and the situation on the ground was so unpredictable. I didn't know when the RCMP was going to start enforcing the injunction. You know, it was a lot to manage. So I just started very small, and it just sort of unfolded from there. But you can see there's a kitchen that was made. There was a hot water tank that led down to a bathtub. There is another tent with wood stove and cut out of a Sasquatch. It was it was a very fun place. Lots of community was created and shared there. And then the residency tent was across the bridge and just around the corner, a little bit closer to where Eden Grove was. And I wanted to give the artists a bit of space to sort of do their own thing. So the artists that participated: Jeremy Hernal, Kyle Sherman, Heather Kai Smith, Mike Andrew McLean, Connie Michelle Murray, Randy Cook, Paul Wald, Valerie Salas, Donna Mueller, and then other people who, they were already out there as artists doing stuff. Ended up inviting a couple of them to join. We had an exhibition of our work last August at Fortune Gallery. And so, the camp ended up closing, being destroyed by the police. Eden Camp got destroyed by the RCMP. The tent, I took down the residency location before then because I knew that was probably going to happen. So yeah, my idea was to see where the connections between art, activism, and ecology and culture all kind of connected. And by culture, I mean learning as much as possible from Pachidat about their relationships with the land and supporting them in their efforts. Was aligning with Elder Bill Jones, Roxy Jones, Polly, and the upcoming hereditary chief Victor Peter, and then as well as artists bringing their own culture to it. So Randy Cook was an incredible resource. I did reach out to many more Indigenous artists and didn't, a lot of people were already super busy and couldn't join. But I'm really glad in this next iteration we've had much more balance, so that's really great. So I started with Jeremy Hernal. I had met him a couple of years earlier when some artists took a trip to Walbrand, and he had been wanting to give us, contribute his art in service of forest protection. So I reached out to him. He was the first person, and he did a series of kind of large oil paintings or tree portraits. And as you can see, they're quite large. That one on the right is now owned by the city, Victoria. Trying to go a little bit faster here. So this is a short video that I want to play, and it just it brings Elder Bill Jones' voice into things. You'll see Hereditary Chief Victor Peter, one of the forest protectors who was at Eden Camp, and then there's a bit with Jeremy.
The Fairy Creek watershed is a spiritual forest used for spiritual purposes up the Fairy Creek and Renfrew Creek area.
The first time I spent time in Eden Grove specifically, it felt like a space for reverence. And it felt like this, like a very holy place of just like a place to come and pray and respect. It was inspiring in the way that it was like this deep, like amazement and awe.
I respect Mother Nature. It's been here for many generations. Old growth trees. It's kind of like, to me, it's like elders.
There is very little of it left, just remnants of our ancient forests.
A tree is not an inanimate object. They are the denizens of the ancient forest. And I'm looking at something that's been there for 800 years, 1,000 years, and I'm painting its portrait. And it's important that it's understood as a portrait, because typically portraits are for painting humans, and in this case, I'm wanting to paint a portrait of these trees in an effort or in a way to acknowledge their agency. They're all very unique. There's so many big old trees in this grove, and they're all extremely different. They're not just trees, they're individuals. And they are part of a greater community of plants and animals and humans too.
It's very important, I'll say, for me to keep them standing.
When you go into a rainforest, like that's never been farmed and never been cut, it's not just one level, it's all the levels of life. It's decomposing and new birth and the joy as well as the sorrow. It's like it's a full spectrum of all these emotions and feelings and spirits and animals and bugs and just everything.
This world is a spiritual place, the whole world, and that in fact we have to reserve places and protect and care for them for our children's needs in their future.
Other types of value that this place represents, aside from the monetary value of that tree, the value of biodiversity, the value of clean water, the value of water retention and holding the hillsides together, and salmon and orcas and myriad other species.
Spirit of this river is so powerful and deep. I feel like there's a huge uprising and an evolution happening.
And I also invite all people to come up to the forest, especially the old growth, for protection and care as you attend to your spiritual needs. And bring the kids. We're wanting to save what's left of it for the children's future and their spiritual needs.
So yeah, there was this tent that had last been used at Cliquot Sound and had been in storage for 30 years and was donated to the movement, and we turned it into a studio tent. So that felt very significant as well, because I had been out arrested at Cliquot Sound, and then it was like this full circle kind of moment. You can see here the artists Paul Wald, Kyle Sherman, and then Paul's assistant, Laura Gildner, and they're all standing on this one massive trunk. And then it's Big Lonely Doug is there on the right. So a lot of people know about Big Lonely Doug, like tons and tons of tourists come there in the summer. But people often don't know that Eden Grove is right beside it. And so there's a lot of education that was going on. The camp sort of was a bit of a watch camp, like a checkpoint. So tourists and locals were allowed to come through, and then industry was sent away. And then eventually the RCMP did enforce the injunction, but first it was kind of odd because T.L. Jones, the logging company, they came and were giving the injunction to forest protectors, which is not really the way it's supposed to work. But so there's a bit of a joke, you're not really an artist in residence until you've been served the injunction, because there's literally, like, when we were moving the tent from one location to slightly over after I'd built a wooden platform, T.L. Jones came, and a couple of the artists were there, and I just talked to them directly. And it was really interesting to be in this position where we weren't, we weren't blockaders. We were artists. And so we were just there in this different function, and to have that conversation with industry and say, well, we're not going to blockade. We're just off to the side of the road here. Is that okay? And they said, well, maybe we should go paint in a less contentious area. And I was like, well, that's actually why we're here. I didn't get into it with them, of course, but like, that is why we're here, is we're wanting to spread, awareness about this place. And to have, industry there and be looking at this painting. I think Kyle had a painting of his leaning up against his truck, and they're kind of looking at it, and they're looking at us, and don't really know what to make of us. There's the injunction. I got served that a couple times. And there's Kyle. So yeah, I just felt like what we were doing there had a very different function, and it was really great for the people in camp as well, to just, because it can be quite grueling and tiring and stressful participating in direct action and just being there day after day, and they're there all through the winter, and to have these artists come and reflect some of their experience, and it was kind of a way for them to process what they were experiencing too, I think. And they ended up getting quite artistic as well. There's a poem that was painted on the bridge so that helicopters would see it when the RCMP are flying above. And you know, just really thinking about the blockade as an art installation as well. There happened to be a lot of artists that were involved in the blockade, and so kind of, yeah, these things started to inform one another, and there's kind of a relationship that was built. So just sort of scanning through some of the artists that were involved, Randy Cook, Hereditary Kwakwaki Cheap. Randy made this amazing mask. It was in our exhibition that was red cedar and yellow cedar, it's called the Mother Tree. And Heather Kai Smith, she really sort of documented some of the social aspect of camp. There's these nightly meetings, and she just, yeah, documented the camp. Connie Michelle Morey did a community engagement sort of project where people did visible mending on socks. And so it's not mending our relationship, you know, with nature, with the forest, but also kind of, I think, taking a stand. There's lots of different layers of meaning to that project. And in the exhibition opening at Legacy tomorrow, you'll see her stop motion animation that involved embroidery called The Ground That Mends. It's really amazing. Mike Andrew McLean did these incredible large format photos. I think it's called digichromatograph prints, where he had 3 different color films that he'd use in the process. As the light changed, it created these sort of halos and interesting effects. Paul Wald's metronome piece, this big only Doug here, and it's set apparently at the rate that trees are cut in BC. So it's interactive. The viewer would tap it, and then it's going tap, 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 and you can feel your heart kind of speeding up too, just like really feeling in your body like how quick, you know, the rate of cut is. And this is a piece after Man Ray, who had a similar piece with an eyeball on the metronome. It's called Time Flies, Trees Fall. And that's also actually going to be in the exhibition again this time. We just loved it, and it doesn't take up much space, so we can put it back. Donna Mueller is one of the artists that was sort of around in the area and ended up basically becoming an artist in residence. And she's did a lot of sort of photojournalism and art. Ken Miner was doing wet plate collodion photos. So he had this piece in the exhibition. And then Tony Grove was a painter that was in the exhibition as well. So you can see he's painting some yellow cedars that were in the top part of Fairy Creek. And I just included, you know, the areas that needed deferral, and then the area that was deferred, part of it was already deferred, and the top section got deferred at some point last year, but it's pretty inadequate. Kyle Sherman documented one of the blockade tactics. Once the blockade became a hard blockade and they topped that bus over and it was blocking. We had 2 hours notice. We took down the artist in residence tent, drove over the bridge, and then that night the bus was dragged across the bridge, and it was pretty dramatic. And there's regular RCMP flyovers that happened. A lot of people have PTSD now when they hear helicopters. So there's the bus, and Kyle painted on it. And then once it was destroyed and everything was taken away, he painted a painting of the bus and brought it back. And so they did this photo shoot. I just thought that was very creative and clever. So the RCMP actually came and they saw that banner. So I just love that. And I just still to this day wonder what they thought. Mike McLean did a photo on the bridge bus as well. So once the RCMP, they're blocking the area, Mike walked 2 hours in with a wagon and his equipment to take this photo. And then he documented after it was taken down. And after the camp was destroyed. Eventually the forest protectors were able to get in there and clean the place up, but the RCMP were blocking a lot of them from actually going there at all. So the exhibition, that's opening tomorrow. Some of the new artists I've sort of listed at the top. So Karen Newman, I'm sure we are all familiar with. He's done some incredible projects, including The Witness Blanket. Gord Hill, who's the artist and author behind 500 Years of Resistance graphic novel. Jordan Hill, he's Souk Nation, and he has a really great installation in the piece I'll show a picture of. And then all of the other artists are from the residency program. And so really expanding beyond Eden Grove, beyond Pacheedaht territory. It just kind of worked out that a lot of the artists are Kwakwaka'wakw, Souk Nation. So, you know, all of these artists have relationships with ancient rainforests. And so they're speaking from their experience. And so I've kind of like, as over the last year, as the ideas have developed, as the artwork has been created, and in preparing for the exhibition and writing about it, kind of landed on these sort of rough categories as you kind of reflect on, like, I don't want to say the role of the artist, but like how their art practices function and ways that their art practices relate to other fields like ecology and you know, and activism and things like that, and then how we relate to the forest and how can we talk about that? What are the different ways that our art practices are informed by relationship with the forests? And so I've kind of articulated these different zones. So like artists as ecologists, because artists are making connections between things and talking about the relationships between things, as well as their relationship with the forest, and really kind of looking for those, you know, trying to find ways of developing more like reciprocal caring like relationships with the forest, and trying to learn like what does it mean to be kin, or how do you act, you know, in a caring way that's sort of like, yeah, that's functions more like an ecosystem would, rather than the extractive relationship that we see on a large scale in BC. And then the artist is activist. So yeah, the forest being that kind of site of contention, but also of hope that, you know, keeps you going. So that's fairly obvious. Like some of the artists to greater or lesser extents felt like what they were doing was a form of maybe not activism, but advocacy. Others would say, yes, it's activism. And then still others say, no, my art is my art. And, but it is, you know, it's functioning in that space. So there's just a whole range of approaches there. The artist as journalist, you know, I kind of think some of the artists like Kyle Sherman, he describes his art as a form of like long form journalism in a way, because he's really documenting what's happening there, but adding these layers of emotion and through these rich colors and everything in his artwork. And Mike is doing a lot of sort of documentation, and so it's kind of seeing that forest as a site of history and stories, and I think it will be really interesting to look back on the artwork that was produced at Eden Grove. And I should say Eden Grove itself is not proposed for being cut at this point. It's not protected, but it was an area past it where there's going to be road building into old growth, and that's why Eden Camp was set up. So bit of a side story, but anyways, I'm just curious to see what happens with Eden Grove and how some of this artwork might be looked at in the future in relation to that place. And then artist as cultural innovator. This is really like the Carrie and Randy, Gord and Jordan, who bring their Indigenous lens to their artwork and relating to the forest more as that side of their own like cultural history, you know, in relationship to their own like sovereignty, a place of spiritual power. And so just all these things kind of interacting. And the center is the Eden Grove Artists in Residence, but it's really just this larger project that we're doing and continuing to do together. So it encapsulates some of the ideas. Here's a newer painting that's going to be in the show. In the center, it's Maki, so a Métis land defender, and I'll just zoom in. There's some details. You can see their hand is in the ground and they're holding on to the roots of a tree. And then the police are keeping the media away and serving the injunction, and they just it just really documents what it was like there, and how horrific and violent the RCMP were. You can see there's somebody just drinking a coffee. So and then you got the SERG, the green guys, they're like the kind of military sort of wing of the RCMP, which it's developed, I don't know, like over the last 6 years or something. And they tend to, it's called the Community Industry Response Group, which is a euphemism for they show up whenever there's, land defense stuff. Sorry, I know I'm taking up a lot of time. This piece here is the floor piece is Randy's, and it's going to be in the exhibition, and it represents some culturally modified trees and the mycelium networks under the ground. So he has a Tree of Life team with Suzanne Simard, the famous ecologist. They have Randy started this team of scientists and artists and knowledge keepers, and they go out to his territory and make art. And so his artwork is informed by Suzanne Simard. There's Suzanne and Mike Worthing, who's for the Sierra Club. Hoping to have a program with Suzanne in the fall. Randy Cook is in the show. You'll see he's moving towards creating totems using second growth trees, and has created some tools to do that. So he's going to be showing a maquette in the exhibition. Valerie Sella's just really documenting the grief and the emotional impact of clear cutting, and she'll have a similar piece in the show. That also talks about the thin blue line badge that was kind of a racist symbol that the RCMP still continue to wear, even though they're told not to. So she's incorporated some thin blue line imagery to talk about police violence and oppression. Kelly Richardson, incredible artist, video installation artist. This is actually an animated piece. I don't have the video, but she was really, it's a tear gas canister, and she's just really inspired by activism and feels very urgently about the situation with climate change. And these butterflies are kind of landing on the tear gas canister and then flying on. And it's just a beautiful piece. Can't wait to see in the gallery.
So Jessie, it looks like we've just got about 5 minutes left. I think we should open up the floor for questions. It's been great to see all these images and to learn about all the artists involved with Eden Grove. But I do want to make sure that the audience that's tuned in has got a chance to ask questions.
Oh, totally. Yeah, sorry. That's actually the last image. That's Jordan Hill's image, but I'll stop my share. Sorry to take up all the time. I get a little carried away.
There's so much to talk about, and it's such a huge project with a lot of moving parts. And so the exhibition opens tomorrow.
4 to 6. And Laura Lee, if you want to just say a couple things real briefly. Laura Lee, I've been working with her closely on the exhibition. She supported it, and it's been amazing. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. So the exhibition will be opening tomorrow at 10 a.m. We're located at 630 Yates Street, which is at the corner of Yates and Broad in downtown Victoria. We're free and open to the public 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day. Not every day, sorry, from Wednesday to Saturday. And this exhibition will run until September 17th. So there's lots of time to get over here over the summer and check it out.
Are there any programs planned out for the summer as part of the show?
To be determined. Jessie and I have been going back and forth. I think we're thinking of maybe, but also planning a program in September with some of the Tree of Life and Mother Tree groups. And what else was I going to say? So come down. Enjoy the show. It's going to be, I think, really breathtaking.
I'm always I'm always blown away at the research that goes into the shows of the legacy, so I'm sure this will be no exception. Always beautiful presentations there. Does anyone have any questions for Jessie or Laura Lee, or just statements about what we've heard this morning?
I just want to, the depth of involvement is just amazing and brilliant between the long-term involvement with the environment and the commitment on all the different levels, and that sort of brilliant academic almost, but the Venn diagram summing it all up. And the background of all the people involved. I'm just, and thank you for all the information as well. It was brilliant.
Thanks, Victoria.
I was wondering what advice you would have if a young person, that was maybe exposed to environmentalism and climate emergency concerns approached you and said, I want to start a residency similar to what you've done in my home territories. What would you suggest or caution them against or propel them towards?
Wow, that would be awesome. Yeah, I mean, connect with the local nation, of course. And I don't know, like, it's so hard to give advice because what we did was so flying by the seat of our pants. Like, it was so unlike any other residency. It's in the middle of this direct action movement. I mean, I think just having a diversity of voices and just, like, I mean, one of the reasons I loved being involved with it is, when I was in art school, one of the things that I love the most about it is just that sense of community and the exchange of ideas, and just so stimulating. And ever since then, I've like kind of just missed that and like wanted to just support that in whatever way I could. And so like, it gives you so much, even though it's exhausting. And like, I didn't have a budget, like I had a fundraiser going, but like I work full time. I'm just doing this like on the side out of passion, but it's such an honor to work closely with artists. And I just feel incredibly honored, and that they all trusted me to like show up to this place, not knowing what the situation is going to be like, and just brought their passion to it. And I would love to see this happen in other places. And I'd actually love to do something like this at like Orca Lab or something like that. And that's my dream. It's like, keep it going somehow, but I don't know.
That's great. In Manitoba, where I'm from, there's the Manitoba Arts Council runs what's called the Deep Bay Artist Residency in Wasagaming, which is it's part of a national park, and artists can go there for, I think, between a week or a month at a time. I was lucky enough to get a couple residencies there over the years, it's just incredible for artists to be able to immerse themselves in different environments like that, whether it is during direct action or more, peaceful times.
I think it just really gives such a needed. Art is so essential right now because, like, I feel like anxieties are really high. They're going to continue to get high, and I think we need ways of, like, artists, of course, like storytellers. There's a way, that art creates meaning and helps you to digest and reflect on things and inspire. And I think we just need it for like emotional and like mental health, and spiritual health and all of it. Because it can just be so overwhelming just being in the world that we're in and taking in the news and all of it, and just a really different way to process things that I really value and advocate for.
Great. Well, as we tend to do at the end of our sessions, we'll thank everyone for showing up, and really thank you so much, Jessie, for preparing that presentation. It was really important to hear those facts, but also to understand the culture and the environment in which Eden Grove Residency flourished. And I really encourage everyone, if you're around and able to go, check out the Legacy show, or the exhibition at Legacy, I should say, opening tomorrow. Our next Creative Morning is going to be Friday, the 29th of July, and the topic will be spirituality. And we've invited local artists, and yeah, Olivier is already tuning in. We've invited local artist and BAC member and volunteer Catherine Fraser to speak about her art practice, which is quite varied. And Catherine really travels different parts of the world and kind of taps into spiritual aspects of various environmental locations, whether it's Scotland or here in Canada. So she'll have a lot to talk about, I think. So yeah, I encourage everyone to sign up for that too. Great. Well, thanks everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.